Okay, well, hello Cindy and anybody else who happens to watch this. Sally did her 3 videos on pour painting landscapes, and she created this beautiful picture right here for you, just for you. And we decided that it would be a good idea
Can you
show
tilt it
you
up? Yeah.
to show you the whole process that we do, because this is only the first huge major step. Then I add the last little step, which is to coat it with epoxy resin. Why do we do that? Well, we were asked to create art for an outdoor art garden, so it had to be weatherproof. And we did some research and found out that if you use epoxy resin, it is UV resistant, it is water resistant, and we've had artwork hanging in this outdoor environment for almost 2 years, year and a half, 2 years now, and it looks brand new. So it works. So that's what we do now. It's just kind of our thing. Sally paints, and I put this epoxy resin on top. And so we wanted to show you how we do that. We're going to do it from the very beginning. These are the materials I use to epoxy coat all of the paintings. And the first step that is not, really doesn't have anything to do with the actual epoxy coating, is to tape off the back side of the artwork. I do that because it is going to drip. It's going to drip off the sides, and if it drips off, when it drips off the sides, it forms little bumps on the back. And those can be very hard to clean off. You don't want to have to sand them off or use a Dremel tool. I've had to do that. And so we tape the back, and the drips end up on the tape, and we can pull them off. Sometimes that's fairly easy. Sometimes it's a little bit hard, but even when it's a little bit hard, it's a whole lot easier than getting drips off the wooden back itself. So we tape with masking tape the back side of the frame here. And like we said when Sally did the painting, we're using gesso board here instead of just canvas. The last one Sally did was real canvas. She repurposed, found an old painting and reused it, and it was canvas, and it sagged. You put a lot of paint on that, and then you put a lot of resin on it, and the surface will sag, and that causes problems. So that's why we like to use this hard gesso board in doing the pour painting. And now I have taped the back, and we're ready to begin the actual process of resin coating the artwork. I can work upside down. Why not?
Oh, that's great.
Make it look better for you. Okay, set that aside. We're done with it. The next step, I've got everything gathered that I need. The next step is to mix the resin. We started out using art resin. That's the brand name, art resin. And we liked it. It was good. It was easy to use. You notice where we are.
In the kitchen.
I had one guy ask me, do you have a special studio with HEPA filtering and all of that stuff? No, I do it in the kitchen. He was flabbergasted.
We can open the door.
But we do it in the kitchen. It's a big, easy to use workspace. And the nice thing about the art resin, and then this other resin we work with now, is that they don't have toxic fumes like some epoxies have. So we can work in here without respirators and all of that. You notice I'm not wearing gloves right now. Some people, the first thing they do is put on gloves, sometimes even double sets of gloves to work on their artwork. I found that cumbersome. I don't like to wear the gloves, and eventually I'll put on a glove when I need to. But right now, Oh, next step, I've got my 4 little cups. So I have to elevate this. Like I said, it's going to drip. I have to elevate it. And that's another advantage of using the gesso board. I don't have to balance the artwork on the edges. I can put it on the back of the art. It sits just a little bit lower. And if the cups are right up against the edge, then the plastic gets on the cups and I have to throw them away every time. Now they're down underneath and I can keep reusing the cups. So now it's elevated. Now it's time to mix our resin. Like I said, we started with art resin, but we wanted something that was a little bit harder, a little bit more durable. So we got this super clear for tabletops, tabletop epoxy. So it is sturdy and hard. And it also cures a little bit faster than the art resin. How much do I need to mix? I've got a little cheat sheet here, art resin coverage. This is a 16 by 20 piece of art. So I look up 16 by 20 takes 11 ounces. Just to be safe, just to be sure, I'm gonna mix 12 ounces, just to give myself a little leeway there. I've got these graduated cups, got them from Amazon. I've got them in 2 different sizes. The small ones, the small pieces of art, we often do little tiles, 8 by 8 tiles, things like that. They don't take a lot of resin, so I've got small cups for that. But if we're going to use more than about 8 ounces, I've got to use a larger cup. So I've got this one. We've got to make 12 ounces. So we use 6 ounces of the resin and 6 ounces of the hardener to make 12 total. Now, I just want a little pet peeve of mine is I was looking on YouTube at how to do this, and there's some experts who were showing me how to do it properly. And they were artsy fartsy, pretentious guys who just, anyway, they were showing me how to do this. And they had a scale. And so they poured until it said 6 ounces, and then they poured until it said 12 ounces. And they thought that was so clever. The problem is they didn't understand the difference between ounces in weight and ounces in volume. They weren't mixing it properly. You have to measure by volume with a cup like this rather than by weight, because these two are very different densities. So I'm going to measure 6 ounces of this. This actually is part B. Part B. It is the hardener, the curing agent. And they tell you to do that first, and then to add part A, the epoxy, to it. Don't ask me why. It doesn't seem to make sense to me, but I am. Now you want to get this nice and level, and there's really no way I can do that. So I get down on my knees here so I can look at the graduated cylinder here and pour in this hardening agent. 4 ounces, 5 ounces, and there's 6 ounces. And it's gonna drip once more. No, it's not, okay. And to keep the jug from getting all nasty and sticky, once I pour it, then I clean off the edge, like so. Throw that in the trash, put the lid back on, and put it back in place. Then we open up the actual resin and do 6 more ounces of resin. You'll see that it's much thicker, denser, heavier. It's going to sink to the bottom and kind of clump up. That's why you can't measure it by weight. It has to be by volume. I'm going to take it up to 12 ounces. Getting close. And there we go. And because it's more viscous, it takes longer for it to stop dripping. One more drip. There we go. Okay, now the next step is to mix the resin. This is the crucial part here. When I was first learning to do this, reading about it, watching videos and so on, they said, set a timer for 3 minutes. Sometimes it said 4 minutes. But set a timer, and I was so careful to do that. I'd set a timer, 3 minutes, and I'd very carefully time it all out. Then I realized, I don't really need to do that. Because you notice now that mixture there looks very milky, translucent. And that's what happens as the chemical reaction takes place of the two parts mixing together. When at the end of the 3 or 4 minutes, it will turn clear again. So I don't time it, I just stir until it's all clear again, and that works for me. Now, an important thing to remember is that these two elements don't really like to mix together very well. So they won't automatically just ooze together like, water and dye or something where it mixes together by itself. It requires mechanical mixing to force these two elements together. So we have to stir it and stir it, not fast, because you don't want to create more bubbles than you need to. Bubbles are the bad guys. They're the enemy. But they're gonna happen. You're gonna have bubbles. So we don't want to get paranoid about it. We just don't want to make more bubbles than we need to. So we need to mix it mechanically, and that means scraping one kind off the wall and make sure that it mixes with the other stuff. The resin and the hardener mix. So we'll scrape around the edges of the container and make sure that all that resin or all the hardener that was there gets scraped off and lets the hardener the resin get in there and mix with it. We also want to make sure that we scrape down in the corners down there around the bottom, and to scrape the bottom, going back and forth along the bottom to scrape it up so that they mix, kind of checkerboard along the bottom there. There's another thing that they tell you not to do, that I do anyway. When you're through and you're getting ready to pour, they say, don't scrape off the stick, because those are not necessarily mixed together. There's been nothing scraping those chemicals together. So you don't want to scrape them off and then have unmixed chemicals in your cup. But there's just something about that bugs me. It's not that I'm worried about wasting that much resin. It just seems sloppy to take that out and lay it down somewhere. I feel like I have to scrape it off. So I just make sure I do it at the beginning and not the end. I scrape it off. Now that I scraped might be unmixed chemicals. So I just scrape that, put it in there, and mix it up. And you can see it starting to get clearer and clearer the longer I mix. And I'll scrape again, scrape it off and mix it up. Mix around the edges several times. We want to make sure we get all of the hardener in contact with all of the resin. And you can see it is still getting more and more transparent, clearer. And by the time it gets perfectly clear, I know that, well, it's probably been 3-4 minutes, and we're ready to pour. And I'm reaching that point now where I feel like it's about ready. Although as I look down into it and I stir it, I see little filaments, and those are signs of where the chemicals aren't totally mixed. So I stir a little bit more. And I'd say we're about ready now. If you put that in it, you can see that once again, it's all clear. And we have bubbles in there. Like I said, they're the bad guys, but we're going to get rid of them later. Now, from this point, I have, depending upon the resin that we're using, I have maybe even up to 40 minutes of working time. We're not going to use all of that. We're going to pour and let it sit pretty quickly here. So we don't have to feel like we're panicking, got to get this done in the next 3 minutes or it sets up. That's a nice thing about this brand of resin I'm using now, is that it does cure much more quickly than the art resin. So I can move to the next step, if I have to. So next step is to pour. Because I mixed the stuff, I can clean off my stick and just lay it down to the side here. And now we just pour it over our art. One person I was following said, you just want to pour it gently on there. You don't want a big dramatic thing, because that might introduce more bubbles, and bubbles are the bad guys. So we just pour it on here gently all over the piece of art. And I don't work really hard to get every last little drop out. And they said, don't scrape it out, just let it come out. And I've got some left in here. I'm going to set that aside, and I may use the residue later. Then I've got my handy dandy spreading tool. Everybody says that you want to use a notched spreader, like a 1/4 inch notch spreader, like you would use with spreading adhesive for tile work. You know what that looks like, I'm sure. But I found out, that's a specialized tool. That's kind of a little bit expensive. 2, I just can't grab one off the shelf somewhere easily. And so instead of using one of those, I just ran to Ace Hardware and I bought myself a little set of cheap little plastic putty knives. And that's what I use. As long as it spreads it, it works. And I've been doing this for 1.5 years now using this, and I've never really had any complaints. You notice I'm getting close to the edge, but not super close. I don't want it to drip over yet. And I'm going to have to scoot around to the other side, trade places with Sally here. You'll have to go around behind me. I say that because I've got to make sure that this is going to be dripping, and I don't want it to drip all over the place. I keep it over there. As you're spreading this, you might keep the snowplow effect in mind, where you have it angled, and so as it moves down, it comes off that top edge and piles up there, so you can get close to the edge, and it's going to drip over. That's okay. I just don't want to do it too much yet. Okay, now this side, I'm going to spread it. There are 2 techniques to do a flat piece of art like this. One is called doming the resin. You actually spread the resin out along the top of the art right up to the edge, and the surface tension makes a little edge of the resin, and it forms a little dome across the top, and you don't get any resin on the sides of the art. And that can be pretty cool, a nice look. I've tried that a little bit. One is it's kind of hard. You have to be careful because if you screw it up and it starts dripping over the edge once, you've pretty much ruined it. You can't go back and un-resin that spot. But other reason, the bigger reason we don't do that is because we are creating our work purposefully so that if you just keep going that way. Spreading it right along the edge, and you can see how it's kind of doming up along the edge there. But we created our artwork specifically so it can be displayed outdoors. And if it's going to be outdoors, we need to have all surfaces coated with the resin. So I make sure that it coats the sides of the canvas as well as the top. Now, I've got the top all covered with resin. It's self-leveling, so even if I scrape and move stuff, goop stuff around, as it sits, it will just even out into a level surface. I set this aside, that's why I've got this paper towel there, and then I get my glove. And I just use one because I'm not going to touch anything goopy with the other hand. My hand is sweaty here, so it doesn't want to go in very easily. Okay. And now we're going to make sure that the edges, the sides of the canvas, of the gesso board, are covered. And we just do that with our fingers in the glove. Here, let me do this side. We get it to drip over, and then we spread it using our fingertip. And I can do it like this. I don't normally do it like this. I can do it from this far side here without even looking at it because I don't have to see it to know if it's working, because this resin obviously is a liquid and it feels kind of oily, you might say. And you can tell the difference between areas where it's covered with resin and areas where it's dry, just from feel. And from sound. It'll kind of give you a scraping sound when it's dry, but it's silent and smooth when it's wet. I'll come back and check that later. And then I do the same thing on this side. You can see it's dripping there. I get some more and just get it to ooze over the edge a little bit. Use my finger to spread it back and forth. More here. And then you might want to come over here, Sally. And I use my finger to get some resin and get all over the edge and just get it dripping a little bit and then spread it out. And you can feel that it's going along smoothly, and then it stops because there's no resin there. So I start doing some more. Nice and smooth along there. Okay, so I've got that. I've got 3 sides done. Come back in. Unfortunately, these sides here are hard to see because the light isn't shining on them. But I'm doing the same thing. Spreading the resin along the edge. There. And now check this one out that I did where I couldn't see it. Okay, now I check that the very corners, the edges here, to make sure that I've got that all coated. Sometimes we get edges where the board sticks out from the resin, and it shouldn't. In fact, that is precisely why I saved some resin. It looks like maybe this corner up here is a little thin, so I've got some leftover resin here. And I'm going to pour it along the edge. It might help, it might not. I usually use a level to make sure that this artwork is level, because as you can see, it just drips everywhere. And if one side is higher than the other, that one will have less resin, and the other side will have it all just fall off the edge. But I'd already checked that before. Okay, the next step, you see all those bubbles? Ugly, ugly bubbles. Bubbles are the bad guys. Can you see them? The camera there? The best way to see them is to have the light coming from the other direction, see the reflection off the bubbles. Now, you could get a toothpick and pop bubbles. That is definitely the hard way to do it. The easy way is to use the handy dandy torch, propane butane torch. And the heat will pop the bubbles. But this is the best and the worst part. It's the best because bubbles are the bad guys, and this is a really satisfying way of killing the bad guys. Watch them just go pop, 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 pop. That's satisfying. But you have to be careful that you don't scorch your resin, because that will cause the resin to look bad. So you have to be very careful to do it right. Start the torch, lock it in place, and then very lightly from far away, don't leave the heat in any one space too long, just enough to pop bubbles. Can you see those?
No, I can't see the
disappearing?
bubbles. But we believe you.
It feels so good to see all those little bubbles just disappear as I do this. And I've got a little bit of a flaw here. In fact, let me just drop a little bit of...
Sometimes you get a little pock mark.
Yeah. Come on, you can do it, you can do it. There's a dimple there where I've got not enough resin. And I could just spread it. But now that it's really starting to set, I don't want to mess with it too much. About the torch, I once heard somebody say the nice thing about the torch is that it pops the bubbles very efficiently, which is true. And they said also you get little bits of dust in there and you just burn the dust out. No, that is very, very untrue. If you get it hot enough to burn off the dust, you're scorching your resin and ruining it. You don't want to do that. So if I look in here and I see little pieces of dust, I'm stuck now. I can't use the torch. I'm going to give the piece one more bit of torch work because I've added some more resin to it, remember? So I'm just going to and maybe pick up a few more bubbles that have formed. I see some popping, so some have formed since I torched it last time. And now that should do it. But I still have some little dust particles in there. That's where I use my toothpick. You can find the dust part. You aren't looking for dust particles. You're not looking for bubbles. What you're looking for are imperfections in the reflection. I'm looking at the light up above, bouncing off of this. And as I move my head, I go, oh, there's a bright spot. That means that there's something there that's reflecting that light weirdly. and I will reach in and try to get a piece of dust, a little hair, or maybe a little bubble that was stuck underneath. That's the problem. That's the problem with Sally. That's Sally's problem, is her medium, her pour painting, creates a very uneven surface. It's a rough surface with a lot of texture in there.
It isn't self-leveling.
Right. And so a lot of times there will be little pits or little valleys, and a bubble will get in that valley and not automatically come up. And I have to go in there and pry it out of its little pit and capture it. Or just plain old pieces of dust.
We live in Arizona.
Where on cleaning day, we dust with a snow shovel.
Well, dusting day is every day.
Yeah. And this is one of the parts I like least, because I'm always afraid that I'm not getting everything, or I find a spot and I just have trouble getting the little spot out, a little piece of dust. And I have to fight it. And eventually I have to just realize that I'm not going to get 100%. I have to just get it good enough here so that when you look at it, you don't notice obvious imperfections. If you take a magnifying glass to it, you'll go, oh, Doug, you missed a spot. Yeah, I know. Okay, but it really helps to get the light at an angle and be looking down at it and just move your head around and go, oh, all of a sudden there's a bright spot. That means that there's a piece of dust right there. Another problem with Sally's very dimensional painting, she's working with fairly thick paint that is poured and piled up. Every now and then I'll get a glob of paint, a little bubble of paint that's sitting up too high, and it will form a little speck here, and
but I want it.
There's not much I can do about that. Okay.
Put on a second coat.
We've done that. Then we go back and you sand it down a little bit and put another coat on to fix that problem. Okay. This is, do you see any obvious errors?
No, it looks really good.
So I'll come around and I'll look from different angles. Step back here. In fact, Sally, if you just step back here. Step back here.
I'm getting the light.
That's okay. That's what we want. We're looking at the light. If you look over here, come over here.
Look in my camera. I'm getting the light. That other light.
Are you seeing little?
Yes, I do see it, but I don't know if I can get it in here.
Right.
Oh, it's right on the edge of where the light is reflecting.
There. So that's how we find those little problems, those little flaws. Is it right here?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that looks like that cleared that up. Okay, one major step.
The kitchen light is making this really hard to see anything.
Well, that's true, but at the same
Reflection.
time, we need that reflection so we can find all of the flaws, the bubbles, the dust specks, dust motes. The next step, Sally, can you get down and show the drips? We got drips here.
I see them.
Okay, now if you'll just step back.
Okay.
I take my stirring stick and I go in and I scrape that excess off the bottom. Make the drips go away. Now, more will form probably after that. It'll keep dripping for a while, but we want to get as much off as possible because you don't want drips on the back of the painting. And the longer they stay there, the harder they get, and the harder they get to remove. Okay. So now we have pretty much finished with that part of the work. Now, we don't want more dust and stuff to settle on there. I created a box to go over the artwork.
I use it all the time.
In fact, I think she's using
I'm
it now.
using it right now
So
for a new one.
I can't use it. So I just cover that artwork with something to protect it from dust drifting down. You got a big sheet of cardboard. It tends to be easy to clean off, like so. And I put my red Solo cups out, and then I very carefully and gently and slowly lay it on top so as not to knock any dust off onto the artwork. And now it's just sitting there incubating, just curing. And it will take about 12 hours until it's dry to the touch. And then we'll move it to our drying room, which is the guest bedroom.
Guest bedroom.
It'll sit on the bed there and wait until 24 hours or so, and it'll be nice and hard. In fact, we'll take the tape off. We'll do that when it's time and show you how that's done.
Okay.
So we have now
Ta-da!
put a resin coat, epoxy resin, on Sally's piece of art that she created for you. See you in a little while.
See you later, Cindy. Bye.
Well, it's been about 8 hours, something like that, since I covered this up. And so now, if we uncover it, the surface is touchable. And while it is still, we want it to be, I hate to use the word dry, because it's not really drying, it's curing. But since it's cured enough that we can handle it, but we don't want it solid, because we want to get that tape off the back before it gets really solid. So what I'm going to do is clean up this area here a little bit and flip it over. So I'll put this down just to protect the surface, because even though it is cured to some extent, it's still a little bit soft.
But you're not going to put any weight on it.
We're not going to put any weight on it at all. We're just going to get the tape off. So, and you can come in closer here. I just peel it off. And as long as it's not too hard yet, I can just go like this. And all that excess resin peels right off. Here, let me. You can see little bumps along here where it's dripped. And yet I'm able to pull it right up. And I have to admit that this is working a whole lot better than it usually does. Often I wait a little bit longer, a little bit too long, and this resin gets hard, stiff, and doesn't want to come up easily. Or there's a lot more residue dripping, get real bumps on there, and it doesn't want to come off easily. But this is about as good as it's ever been.
Why don't you remove the cloth so it's sitting on the pretty wood? Yeah.
And there is our finished product.
You can see our lights in it. But there, that looks, I'm very pleased, hon.
Okay. It has been resin coated. Now Sally will paint the back
Yes.
with acrylic paint so that it
Just
is
black.
it is truly
And then we put a
waterproof
hanger on the top.
all over.
And I sign the back with the name of the painting or where it is. This is Camel Butte in Monument Valley. So that'll be on the back with a signature. Doug won't sign them, silly man. He does as much as I do. So there you go.
There we go.
There you go, Cindy.
It has been painted and resin coated and ready to go. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.